The city lights of San Francisco have always made me feel small, like I was standing beneath 1,000 watching eyes, each one reminding me of everything I'd built and everything I could lose. I used to love this city. The hum of the cable cars, the fog curling over the Golden Gate, the late nights filled with coffee and code. That was before I learned that love and loyalty can both be hacked, not by strangers, but by the person sleeping beside you. My name is Kira Vaughn, and 3 months ago, I thought I had it all. A growing tech startup, an app I had designed from scratch called Ecliptic, and a husband, Daniel, who was my biggest supporter, or so I thought. Daniel wasn't just my husband. He was my co-founder, my confidant, my partner in every sense of the word. We met at a startup accelerator 7 years ago. He pitched numbers, I pitched dreams. Together, we built something real. Or at least, I believed we did. Ecliptic was supposed to change everything. An AI-powered financial tool that helped small business owners predict cash flow patterns and automate investments. Investors called it the next-gen financial oracle. I called it my legacy. But legacies are fragile things, especially when you share them with someone who knows exactly where to cut. It started with small changes. Daniel became distant. He stopped joining meetings. He brushed off updates. And when I asked him about missing investor calls, he'd say, "You worry too much, Kira. I've got it under control." I wanted to believe him because I loved him, because I needed to believe that after 15 years of marriage, he still saw me as his equal. Then one evening, everything changed. It was a Friday. Rain was drumming against the office windows. I stayed late to polish a presentation for our next funding round. When I tried to access our secure server, the one where we stored all prototype code, my credentials failed. Access denied. My pulse quickened. Maybe it was a system glitch. Maybe Daniel had updated permissions. But as I dug deeper, I noticed something strange. A duplicate repository under a new project name, Nova Edge Tech. My heart sank. Nova Edge was our competitor. And when I opened the file logs, I froze. Daniel's login, timestamped uploads, entire modules of Ecliptic's source code, copied and transferred. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. It was like my brain refused to translate what I was seeing. My husband, the man who'd built this company with me, had sold our innovation, my life's work, our life's work, for money. When I finally confronted him, I was shaking. "Daniel," I whispered, standing in the kitchen, laptop trembling in my hands. "Tell me this isn't real." He didn't even flinch, just sighed, rubbed his forehead, and said, "Kira, you're being dramatic." "Dramatic? You stole our code. You gave it to Nova Edge." He leaned back against the counter, eyes cold. "I didn't steal anything. I sold my half. You can't copyright an idea." The words cut deeper than any knife. My half. He wasn't just stealing, he was rewriting history. You sold me out," I said, voice breaking. He laughed quietly. "It's not personal, it's business. You were holding us back. You obsess over ethics and ideals. The world doesn't reward idealists, Kira. It rewards winners." That's when I realized I had never been his partner. I'd been his pawn, and he'd just made his final move. I remember standing there, staring at him. The rain outside turned into a storm, wind rattling the glass like applause for his betrayal. My fingers went numb. My chest felt hollow. And for the first time in my life, I didn't cry. Instead, I felt something colder, sharper, something that whispered, "Don't let him win." That night, I packed a small bag, left the penthouse, and drove until I could no longer see the skyline. Somewhere near Half Moon Bay, I pulled over and sat by the cliffs. The waves crashed against the rocks, fierce and endless, and I realized that was me now, broken, but not defeated. In the darkness, I opened my laptop. If Daniel thought he'd buried me, he was wrong. He had just given birth to something else, something stronger, a new identity, a new app, a new me. And this time, he wouldn't even see me coming. The silent partner had just begun. The world thinks I disappeared that night. And maybe, in a way, I did. For the next 3 months, I lived like a ghost. No social media, no friends, no credit card trail. Just a rented cabin overlooking the Pacific, a dying Wi-Fi signal, and the constant echo of my own thoughts. I wasn't hiding, I was rebuilding. When you lose everything, you have 2 choices: drown in the wreckage, or learn how to swim in sharper waters. I chose the latter. The mornings were cold, the air biting with salt and silence. I'd wake up before sunrise, wrap myself in a blanket, and sit on the porch with my old MacBook balanced on my knees. The same laptop that once held the blueprints for Ecliptic. Now the tombstone of my betrayal. But it was also where my revenge would begin. I spent days rewriting code, reimagining every feature Daniel thought he owned. If he sold Ecliptic, I'd create something that would eclipse it entirely, something smarter, sleeker, untouchable. I called it Solace. The name came to me while watching the ocean one morning. The way waves crash, retreat, and return stronger. Solace wasn't just an app. It was resurrection disguised as innovation. Still, I knew code alone wouldn't destroy him. If I wanted to hit Daniel where it hurt, his ego, his empire, I needed a face he'd never recognize. That's when Mara Langley was born. Age 32, tech consultant from Portland, blonde highlights, brown contact lenses, a new LinkedIn profile, complete with fake recommendations and an old college photo of someone who vaguely looked like me. I registered a new company, Orion Technologies, through an anonymous Delaware LLC, layered behind encrypted proxies and a rented P.O. box in Palo Alto. No one could trace it back to Kira Vaughn, not even Daniel. The first week I launched the early prototype of Solace, it barely worked. But with every sleepless night, with every coffee-stained line of code, it began to breathe. It started predicting user spending patterns better than anything on the market. It didn't just forecast, it adapted. I smiled the first time the algorithm outperformed the old Ecliptic system. It was like watching my own ghost outsmart the thief who killed it. By the end of month 2, I was ready to test it. But I needed help. Someone sharp, loyal, and preferably disconnected from my past. That's when Lila Monroe entered my life. I met her at a small co-working space near Santa Cruz. She was 27, a data scientist who had just been laid off from a fintech startup after their CEO got caught laundering funds. She had that restless brilliance in her eyes, the kind that only comes from people who've been underestimated too many times. Solace? She asked, scanning the minimalist logo on my laptop. Interesting name. What's it do? It listens, I said simply. And it learns. She laughed. So, an AI therapist for your bank account? Something like that, I replied. But better. We talked for hours. I liked her instantly. Her directness, her dry humor, the quiet fire in her voice when she talked about wanting to prove herself. By the next week, she was officially my first hire. I didn't tell her who I really was. Not yet. We worked in silence most days, surviving on instant noodles and stubborn ambition. Lila didn't ask where the funding came from, and I didn't volunteer that I was financing everything by selling jewelry Daniel had given me over the years. Each diamond sold was like a scar healed. Then one night, around 2 a.m., she looked up from her screen and asked, "Who burned you, Mara?" I froze. "What makes you think someone did?" She shrugged. "Because you code like someone trying to bury a ghost?" I smiled faintly. Maybe I am. By the 3rd month, Solace was ready for investors, and fate, in all its cruel irony, decided to deliver the perfect opportunity. A major VC firm in San Francisco, Keston Capital, announced an innovation challenge. The winning startup would receive $5 million in seed funding and immediate mentorship. Daniel's new company, Nova Edge, was listed as a strategic partner. The irony almost made me laugh. Almost. I could walk right into his world, and he'd never know it was me. I looked at the mirror that night, the contact lenses, the lighter hair, the new posture that came from pretending to be someone else. Kira Vaughn was gone. Mara Langley was ready. "Let's see how it feels," I whispered to my reflection. "To play the game you thought I couldn't." The day of the pitch came faster than I expected. Lila and I arrived at Keston's glass-walled headquarters, surrounded by a sea of startup founders rehearsing their slides. I kept my composure, but my pulse hammered in my chest. I was walking into the lion's den. When our turn came, the panel looked impressive. Venture capitalists, tech reporters, and one guest representative from Nova Edge, Daniel Vaughn, my husband. His hair was shorter, his suit sharper. He looked every bit the visionary he'd pretended to be. And when his eyes briefly met mine, I held my breath. He didn't recognize me. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt power, real power, course through me like electricity. This was no longer just revenge. This was justice, wrapped in silence. As I began my pitch for Solace, I smiled. He had no idea that the woman standing before him wasn't a stranger, but the ghost he created. Next up, Orion Technologies, presenting Solace, the moderator announced. My pulse hammered. The room was sleek and sterile, floor-to-ceiling glass, digital screens glowing with graphs and valuations. Every click of a keyboard echoed like judgment. I stepped onto the stage with a calm I didn't fully feel. Lila followed beside me, clutching her tablet, her nerves visible but her spirit steady. Daniel sat in the front row, flanked by executives and investors. His gaze was cold, professional. A predator assessing prey. If only he knew. Good afternoon, I began. My name is Mara Langley, and I'm here to introduce a revolution in predictive financial intelligence, Solace. My voice didn't shake. It flowed, precise, deliberate, measured. Years of investor meetings and sleepless nights had trained me for this moment. Except this time, I wasn't fighting for funding. I was fighting for poetic justice. I tapped the screen behind me. The logo appeared. Solace, the future listens. This isn't another budgeting app. It's an adaptive learning model, one that evolves with every transaction, predicting not just what you'll spend, but why. Investors leaned forward, eyes lit up. Even Daniel shifted in his seat. I saw it. That flicker of curiosity, that tiny moment when arrogance begins to crumble into doubt. I smiled. The difference between prediction and understanding, I continued, is empathy. Solace doesn't just analyze numbers. It interprets human intent. It listens, learns, and improves autonomously. The panel began whispering. One of them, a woman from Forbes Tech, raised her hand. Ms. Langley, what differentiates Solace from Ecliptic or Nova Edge's systems? I paused for effect. The irony was delicious. Well, I said, tilting my head slightly, Ecliptic focused on automation, Nova Edge on replication. Solace focuses on evolution. The others simulate data patterns. We simulate human behavior. A low murmur of approval rippled across the room. I caught Daniel's reaction. A slight tightening of his jaw. A small twitch in his hand. He knew not who I was, not yet, but he felt it. That same code, that same rhythm, living and breathing in front of him under a new name. Good. Let the ghost haunt him. After the pitch, we stepped off stage to a wave of applause. Investors surrounded us, shaking hands, exchanging cards, promising follow-ups. Lila's face was glowing. We nailed it, she whispered. They loved us. I smiled, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying Daniel's expression in my head. He wasn't smiling, he was calculating. He always was. Later that evening, Keston Capital hosted a cocktail reception on the rooftop. The San Francisco skyline shimmered in gold and glass as jazz music drifted through the air. Lila chatted excitedly with other founders, while I stood alone by the balcony, a glass of champagne untouched in my hand. I heard his voice before I saw him. Impressive presentation, Ms. Langley. I turned. Daniel stood a few feet away, confident, charming, the mask of success firmly in place. The same mask I once trusted. Thank you, I said evenly. I appreciate that. He approached, offering a polite smile. Solace, was it? Reminds me of a project I used to be involved with years ago. Similar architecture, AI-based forecasting models. Ah, I said, feigning curiosity. You must be referring to Ecliptic. He blinked, just for a second. You know it? I study my competition, I replied smoothly. Though from what I've seen, Solace already outperforms it. He chuckled softly. Confident. I like that. I met his eyes. Confidence comes from experience, Mr. Vaughn. He tilted his head, trying to read me. Have we met before? A dangerous question. My pulse quickened, but my smile never wavered. Doubt it, I said. I'm new to this side of the market. He studied me for another moment, then extended his hand. Well, Ms. Langley, I look forward to seeing how your company develops. I took his hand. His grip was firm, still familiar, still arrogant. But as our fingers touched, I whispered so softly only he could hear. Be careful who you underestimate. He frowned slightly. Pardon? I let go. Nothing, just advice. And I walked away, leaving him staring after me. That night, back in the cabin, Lila was still buzzing with excitement. Keston wants a full demo next week, she exclaimed. They said Solace could be the most adaptive AI system they've ever seen. I nodded, trying to focus, but my mind was elsewhere. For the first time, Daniel had looked into my eyes and not known me. The satisfaction was intoxicating, but beneath it lay something darker. A pulse of anger that hadn't faded, only evolved. "Lila," I said softly, closing my laptop, "if you could ruin the person who took everything from you, would you do it?" She hesitated. "Depends. Did they deserve it?" "Yes," I said coldly, "completely." She looked at me, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Then I'd make sure they never saw it coming." I smiled. "Exactly." The following days blurred together, endless meetings, code refinements, investor calls. But one night, as I reviewed Keston's emails, I noticed something odd. The invitation for the next demo didn't just come from the firm. It came directly from Daniel Vaughn. Attached was a short note. "Your presentation intrigued me. I'd like to meet privately to discuss a potential partnership between Nova Edge and Orion. DV." I stared at the screen for a long time, my reflection faint against the glow. He wanted to meet me. The irony was almost poetic. The man who stole my life's work now wanted to collaborate with its ghost. Perfect. The trap had set itself. I closed the laptop and leaned back, letting the silence stretch. I could almost hear his voice from years ago. Smug, dismissive, confident. "You were holding us back, Kira." "No, Daniel. You just created your biggest competitor." I smiled into the darkness. "Let's dance." The email replayed in my head for days. Every word of it, smooth, polite, dripping with manipulation disguised as opportunity. "I'd like to discuss a potential partnership between Nova Edge and Orion. Your technology could complement our predictive models perfectly. Dinner, perhaps, discretion assured." Typical Daniel, still the same vulture, only now pretending to offer peace with a smile. But this was exactly what I wanted. The meeting was set for Friday night at the Glass House, one of the most exclusive rooftop restaurants in San Francisco. The kind of place where investors negotiated billion-dollar mergers over Wagyu steak and $400 wine. And the kind of place where Daniel liked to play God. I spent the entire afternoon preparing, not just what I'd say, but who I needed to be. Mara Langley, elegant, mysterious, confident. A woman who owned the room before she even walked in. My hair was straighter, lighter, my voice lower. My makeup subtle but sharp, every detail calculated. I wasn't meeting my ex-husband, I was meeting my prey. When I arrived, the city glittered beneath a sea of lights. The glass house towered above the skyline, all marble and glass and quiet luxury. Daniel was already there, of course. He always liked being early, gave him time to size people up. He stood when he saw me. "Ms. Langley," he greeted, smiling that practiced, camera-ready smile. "You look stunning." "Thank you," I said, taking a seat. "I appreciate you reaching out." He poured me a glass of wine before I could refuse. "Old habit." "I meant what I said in my email," he began. "Your product has potential. I think with the right partnership, Solace could reach a global scale." "Oh?" I asked lightly. "And what kind of partnership do you have in mind?" He leaned back, confidence oozing from every gesture. "Simple. Nova Edge provides infrastructure, funding, and access to our investor network. Orion contributes the core model. We share profits 50-50. I almost laughed. 50-50. The same words he used when we built Ecliptic, before he took 100% for himself, but I kept my face neutral. "That's generous," I said. "You don't usually share credit, Mr. Vaughn." He chuckled softly. "You've done your research. I make it a habit to know who I'm dining with." His eyes narrowed slightly, testing, probing. "Tell me, Ms. Langley, what drives you? Money? Legacy? Or are you one of those idealists who still believes tech should help people?" I smiled faintly. "I believe in balance. Some people take, others rebuild. I just prefer to be the latter." He raised a brow. "Poetic." "You'd be surprised how much poetry hides inside business," I said, swirling my wine. "It's all about rhythm, timing. Revenge and redemption often sound the same if you play them right." He laughed, not realizing the weight behind my words. That was the thing about Daniel. He always heard, but never listened. The waiter arrived with their orders. Sea bass for him, risotto for me. As we ate, he talked about Nova Edge's expansion, about his vision for the future. Every sentence was an echo of the man I used to admire. Confident, articulate, utterly soulless. Then he leaned forward. "Be honest, Mara. You didn't build Solace alone, did you?" My fork froze midair. He was fishing, instinctively, the way he always did. I tilted my head. "Why do you ask?" He shrugged casually. Because innovation like that doesn't come from nowhere. I've seen similar frameworks before. Years ago. He didn't know it, but that was the first time he'd spoken our past into the present. Oh, I said softly, and what happened to that project? He smiled thinly. Let's just say the original team couldn't handle the pressure. I learned a lot from their mistakes. I stared at him for a moment, letting the silence stretch, just long enough to make him uncomfortable. Funny, I finally said, because I've learned something too. He leaned in. What's that? I smiled coldly. Pressure doesn't destroy everyone, Daniel. Some of us are built to survive it. He froze for half a second. The use of his first name slipped past before I could stop it. Or maybe, deep down, I didn't want to. Pardon? He asked, brow furrowing. I set down my glass. You remind me of someone, I said smoothly. A man who thought he could buy loyalty the same way he bought equity. It didn't end well for him. He studied me, his smile faltering for the first time. You're interesting, Ms. Langley. I've been told that before. After dinner, he suggested a walk on the terrace. The night air was crisp, the city glittering below like a map of fragile stars. He stood beside me, hands in his pockets. I'll be honest, I don't meet many people who challenge me like you do. I'm not here to challenge you, I said, turning toward the railing. Just to build something better. Then we have the same goal, he said smoothly. I smiled without looking at him. I doubt it. He chuckled. You know, I can't shake the feeling we've met before. You say that to all your business partners, I teased. No, he said quietly. Only the ones who make me nervous. For a split second, I saw it. The flicker of vulnerability beneath the arrogance. A weakness, and I intended to use it. Later that night, as I drove back to the cabin, I replayed every word, every look, every moment he thought he was in control. He wanted a partnership? Fine, I'd give him one. The kind that would tie a noose around his company, and he'd help me tighten it. When I got home, Lila was waiting, typing furiously on her laptop. Good news? She asked without looking up. I smirked. He took the bait. She turned to me, eyes wide. He doesn't suspect? Not yet, I said, taking off my coat. But he will, and by the time he does, it'll be too late. I sat beside her, opening my laptop. Let's set up a dummy partnership proposal, I said. I want Nova Edge's system access. At least their predictive model architecture. We'll tell him we're syncing Solace for compatibility. Lila frowned. That's hacking. It's business, I said flatly. I'm just taking back what was stolen. As the night deepened, lines of code began to fill the screen again. Familiar, rhythmic, alive. The same patterns Daniel had taken from me once before. Only this time, they would destroy him. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the cabin like liquid gold, but I barely noticed. Lila and I had been up all night, coding, planning, and refining the proposal. A sleek digital document that looked as legitimate as any billion-dollar partnership agreement. On paper, it was perfect. Orion Technologies and Nova Edge, joining forces to revolutionize adaptive AI financial modeling. But hidden beneath its surface were invisible hooks, access protocols, mirror servers, and a data bridge that would quietly copy every byte Nova Edge uploaded into our shared workspace. If Daniel approved the integration, I'd gain full visibility into his stolen architecture. Every stolen line of my code, every transaction, every secret. This wasn't just business anymore, it was surgery, and I was about to open him up. Are you sure this will work? Lila asked, rubbing her temples. Her eyes were ringed with exhaustion, but alive with adrenaline. It has to, I said, reviewing the draft one last time. He wants to believe he's in control. That's the key. She nodded. You're really something, Mara. You sound like you've done this before. I gave a faint smile. You'd be surprised how far desperation can push a person. When she wasn't looking, my reflection in the dark laptop screen flickered between Mara Langley and Kira Vaughn. It was getting harder to tell where one ended and the other began. By mid-afternoon, Daniel replied. From Daniel Vaughn. Subject, approved. Let's make it official. Attach your API framework and sync guidelines. I'll authorize access through our Nova Edge sandbox by Monday. He even added a smiley emoji at the end, as if betrayal could be softened with punctuation. Lila squealed, clapping her hands. He said, yes, we're in. I nodded slowly. We're in, I echoed. But deep down, I knew this was the moment the game stopped being theoretical. From here on, there was no turning back. That night, I opened a private, encrypted workspace I'd built years ago, back when I still believed Daniel and I were building a future together. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was using the same digital vault he once bragged about creating for our protection. It would now become the knife I used to dissect him. I set up the mirrored gateway, testing it 3 times. Once Daniel's system synced, every Nova Edge model update would automatically clone into my private server, without triggering any alerts. Lila didn't need to know that part, not yet. Monday arrived like thunder. At 8:47 a.m., the notification blinked. Nova Edge systems connected successfully. Data synchronization initiated. My pulse skipped. He'd activated it. Within minutes, the first files began appearing in our logs. Code fragments, predictive matrices, behavioral datasets, all stolen from the foundation of Ecliptic, repackaged under Nova Edge's name. I clicked open one of the algorithm scripts and froze. There it was, my variable naming pattern, my logic sequencing, my indentation style, identical. Daniel hadn't even bothered to rewrite it. He'd stolen my work word for word. The fury hit like fire. My hands trembled over the keyboard. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was erasure. He'd erased me. Lila noticed the change in my breathing. "Mara, you okay?" I forced a smile. Perfectly fine. But inside, I was a storm. Over the next few days, I watched Nova Edge's data pour into our system. Line after line, terabyte after terabyte. It was intoxicating and horrifying all at once. I could see his empire from the inside now. The investors, the project timelines, the partnerships, even the hidden files, meant only for executive eyes. And buried within them, something unexpected. A folder labeled Ecliptic Originals Access Restricted, encrypted by DV. My breath caught. He still had the old project archives, my archives, which meant somewhere, in those encrypted files, lay the evidence of everything he'd done. Proof, finally. "Lila," I said, leaning toward her. "I need you to build a decryptor for a secondary partition. Use brute force masking, but make it look like routine system testing." She frowned. "Why? What's in there?" "Something that doesn't belong to him," I said. "Something that might end all of this." Lila hesitated. "Mara, are you sure you want to cross this line?" I looked at her. Really looked. She was young, brilliant, still believed in rules. I remembered when I was like that. "I crossed it a long time ago," I said softly. "Now I just plan to finish the walk." By the 3rd night, we had it. The encryption broke open with a single eerie beep. Inside were a dozen hidden contracts, server logs, and correspondence chains. Proof that Daniel had sold the Ecliptic source code piece by piece to shell companies registered under his own aliases. He'd made millions. And he'd used my name in the contracts, forged digital signatures to make it look like I'd consented. My stomach dropped. I felt sick, physically sick. Reading my own name beside words like transfer authorization and mutual profit agreement. He hadn't just stolen from me. He'd turned me into an accomplice. I stood from the desk, heart pounding. The room felt smaller, darker, pressing in around me. "Caught, Mara?" Lila asked, confused by my sudden movement. "What's wrong?" I took a shaky breath, forcing composure. He forged everything, every deal, every signature. "Wait, forged? That's felony-level fraud," I finished. "If this gets out, Nova Edge burns to the ground." Lila's face paled. "So, what now?" I stared at the glowing screen. Daniel Vaughn's name sat on every document like a stain that wouldn't wash away. What now? Now the game changed. "We leak nothing yet," I said. "Not until I can use it. I want him to invite his own destruction." Lila nodded slowly, unsure but trusting. "You're playing with fire." I smiled faintly. "Good. It's about time he got burned." That night, I saved everything. The evidence, the mirrored logs, the system access. Then I created a new file. A simple presentation deck titled Solace Nova Edge Merger Vision. It wasn't real, but it would be his undoing. Because I knew Daniel, and if there was one thing he couldn't resist, it was glory. The kind that made headlines. I'd lead him straight to it and watch him fall from the peak. There's a strange thrill that comes from watching your enemy walk straight into your plan. Smiling, confident, completely unaware they're already lost. That's how I felt when Daniel replied to my merger presentation. From Daniel Vaughn. Subject: Let's make history. This could be monumental, Mara. Nova Edge plus Aurion, a merger that redefines predictive AI. Let's present it together to Keston Capital next week. Together. The word almost made me laugh. 7 years ago, he'd said the same thing to me in our old apartment, barefoot, holding a champagne glass after our first investor signed on for Ecliptic. We're unstoppable, Kira. Together. Back then, I believed him. Now, I just heard the echo of a lie. But this time, I'd let him speak it again. For the last time. Are you sure this is smart? Lila asked, pacing our cramped workspace. If you get caught accessing Nova Edge's systems, it's not just his downfall. It's yours too. I won't get caught, I said, eyes fixed on my screen. Because he's going to invite me in himself. She frowned. That's what scares me. It should, I replied softly. Fear means we're close. Lila sighed, shaking her head. You're terrifying sometimes, you know that? Good, I said, smiling faintly. He taught me well. The days that followed were a blur of chaos wrapped in calm. Daniel threw himself into planning the joint pitch, sending spreadsheets, mock valuations, projections. Every document he sent, every attachment, synced directly into my mirrored system, feeding my private archive like a digital bloodstream. He thought he was guiding me, but I was pulling his strings. By Wednesday, the merger vision presentation was finalized. 30 polished slides of buzzwords, projections, and smiling optimism, all designed to hide the trap beneath. The final slide read, Live Product Demo, Real-Time Integration between Solace and Nova Edge Predictive Cores. That was where I'd strike. Friday came like a storm. Keston Capital's auditorium buzzed with energy. Rows of venture capitalists, reporters, and cameras flashing beneath crystal lights. It felt like déjà vu, standing under the same kind of spotlight Daniel once stole from me. I wasn't nervous. Not anymore. I'd been burned before. Fire doesn't scare fire. Ready? Daniel asked, walking up beside me backstage. He looked immaculate. Black suit, silver tie, that same rehearsed confidence. After today, we'll make history. I met his eyes. Yes, I said softly. We will. The presentation began. Daniel took the stage first, his charisma on full display. He spoke about innovation, disruption, legacy, all the usual buzzwords dressed as brilliance. The crowd hung on every word. Then it was my turn. Thank you, Mr. Vaughn, I began, stepping forward with calm poise. At Aurion, we believe evolution is not about replacing the old, but reclaiming it. A ripple of curiosity moved through the room. I clicked the remote, revealing the first graph, the fake data projections I'd crafted overnight. Daniel smiled approvingly beside me. He thought he was watching his next triumph. He had no idea he was watching his own obituary. Today, I continued, we present a seamless integration between Solace and Nova Edge. 2 systems, 1 purpose, to predict financial futures with emotional intelligence. The final slide appeared, Live Integration Demo. Daniel took the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time ever, 2 adaptive AI cores will merge in real time to demonstrate predictive synchronization. He turned to me. Ready, Mara? I smiled. Always. As he pressed run, both our systems began syncing through the cloud link. Behind the scenes, my mirrored code came alive. The one Lila and I had modified to inject Nova Edge's private logs into the shared dashboard. On the big screen, colorful data streams danced. The audience gasped. It looked like innovation, but in reality, I was extracting every file Daniel ever buried. And then, for a split second, the screen glitched. A hidden folder appeared. 1 line of text flashing faintly in red. Property of Kira Vaughn, original source archive. Daniel's hand twitched. His smile faltered. What was that? He muttered, pressing keys rapidly. Probably just a cache conflict, I said smoothly, hiding my grin. But it was too late. The audience had seen it. The name, bright and clear, projected onto the main screen before vanishing. Whispers spread instantly. The presentation continued, but Daniel was sweating now. His rhythm cracked. I watched him lose his composure, bit by bit, as he struggled to explain the glitch away. When it ended, the applause was polite, uncertain. And when the reporters began approaching, one of them asked, Mr. Vaughn, who is Kira Vaughn? He froze. The cameras turned toward him like guns. I don't know, he stammered. Probably a system tag. Nothing important. But the tone in the room had changed. Suspicion had entered the air. Quiet but sharp. And I fed it. Backstage, Daniel stormed toward me, face pale with fury. What the hell was that? He hissed. Where did that name come from? I tilted my head innocently. What name? Kira Vaughn. Oh, I smiled faintly. It popped up during the sync. Maybe a ghost in your code? His eyes narrowed. You're mocking me. Only if you deserve it, I said quietly. Do you? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. If you're playing games with me, Mara, you'll regret it. The venom in his tone almost made me laugh. Regret? Daniel, I built regret. I've lived in it. For a moment, he looked at me. Really looked. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, memory, but before he could speak, Lila appeared behind me. Reporters are asking for you, Mara, she said. They want your comment on the integration results. I nodded. Tell them I'll be right there. Then I turned back to him, calm, controlled. You wanted history, Daniel. Now you have it. And I walked away, leaving him in the chaos of whispers, cameras, and doubt. That night, my inbox exploded. Journalists, analysts, anonymous emails from Nova Edge employees. Everyone wanted to know, who was Kira Vaughn? Some called it a glitch, others a leak. But in the chaos, downloads spiked. Solace was trending. And deep within my private server, the last of Daniel's hidden files finished transferring. I opened one final document, a confidential memo sent from Daniel to his board. Ecliptic IP transfer complete. Kira Vaughn's absence remains advantageous. Recommend purging all related archives permanently. My vision blurred. For years, I'd wondered how he'd justified my disappearance to the world. Now I knew. He'd deleted me, even on paper. Well, let's see how it feels to be the one erased. I closed the laptop and whispered to myself. Tomorrow I stop being a ghost. The morning after the pitch felt electric. Not peaceful, not calm, but charged, like the air before a thunderstorm. Headlines filled every tech site and finance feed I opened. Who is Kira Vaughn? The name that interrupted Nova Edge's presentation. Glitch or ghost? AI demo exposes hidden source archive. Daniel Vaughn faces questions over data integrity. He must have been losing his mind. I sipped my coffee slowly, savoring the irony. For years, I'd woken up to silence. No recognition, no justice, just the hum of regret. Now, the world was finally whispering my name again. And he didn't even know who started the fire. At noon, Lila burst into the cabin, breathless. Mara, it's everywhere. The clip's gone viral. Investors are pulling meetings with Nova Edge. And you're trending too. Me? I looked up from my laptop. Under what? She hesitated, then read from her phone. Mara Langley, the mysterious partner who glitched the ghost. I smirked. Not bad, has a nice ring to it. But behind the smile, my mind was spinning. The attention was growing faster than I'd planned. I needed to stay one step ahead. Before Daniel tried to rewrite the narrative again. Because that's what he did best. Erase, replace, and pretend nothing happened. Not this time. That afternoon, a notification popped up on my screen. An encrypted message. No sender name, just one line of text. We need to talk tonight, 9 p.m., same place. The Glass House. He was panicking. Good. When I arrived that night, the restaurant was nearly empty. The city below shimmered through the glass like a living circuit board. Daniel sat alone, drink in hand, face drawn tight, no longer the charming visionary. Just a man watching his empire burn. Ms. Langley, he greeted, voice dry. Or should I say, something else. I sat opposite him, calm, collected. You can call me whatever you like. His jaw clenched. Who are you, really? I tilted my head. You seem like the kind of man who already knows. He studied me for a long moment, then quietly. That name, Kira Vaughn, it wasn't random. You did that. I smiled faintly. Smart boy. Why, he demanded. Why drag my company into this? You don't know what you're playing with. Don't I? I leaned forward. You stole my code, Daniel. You forged my name. You sold my life's work like it was your personal currency. And now you have the nerve to act like you're the victim. His expression shifted. Anger, confusion, denial. That's not possible, he said, shaking his head. Kira's dead. I let the silence stretch before whispering, she was. His eyes widened. No. Dead? I repeated. Only because you buried her. He recoiled slightly, voice cracking. Kira? Don't, I cut him off sharply. You don't get to say my name. For the first time in years, I saw him break. The facade cracking open like a fault line. He looked at me not as an opponent, but as a ghost, something he thought he'd erased forever. You faked your death, he said quietly. You disappeared. I didn't disappear, Daniel, I said coldly. You erased me. You told everyone I'd stepped away from the company. You changed the narrative. You signed my name to the sale contracts. You cashed the checks. He swallowed hard, guilt flickering for a moment before pride buried it. I built Nova Edge, he said. You left me no choice. Investors wanted control. You were too cautious, too emotional. I laughed bitterly. And you call that business? You didn't build anything, Daniel. You just rebranded my work and convinced yourself you deserved it. He leaned forward. What do you want, Kira? Money? A seat at the table again? I can fix this if you stop now. I met his eyes, calm and precise. You can't fix what's already rotting. He stood up suddenly, frustration spilling out. Do you even realize what you've done? You've tanked our valuation overnight. Keston is freezing the merger. The board wants answers. You've destroyed years of work. Correction, I said softly. You destroyed it. I just turned on the lights. He stared at me, speechless. Everything you took, the contracts, the forged IP transfers. I have them, I continued. Every file, every signature, every lie. All backed up, all authenticated. His voice dropped. You hacked me. I smiled. No, you let me in. He slammed his glass onto the table. If you release that data, you'll go down too. I stood. Maybe, but at least I'll go down telling the truth. He froze. I lost everything once, I said quietly. My company, my name, my life. This time, I decide how the story ends. Outside, the city air felt different, lighter, sharper. I walked to the edge of the terrace, phone in hand. The files glowed on my screen, ready to send. Every document, every forged signature. Proof that Daniel Vaughn had built his empire on a grave. I hovered over the upload button, just one tap, and it would all burn. Behind me, I heard the door open. Daniel stepped out, voice trembling. Kira, don't do this. You'll ruin us both. I turned, calm but resolute. There is no us, Daniel. He took a hesitant step closer. Please, let's fix this together. Together, I echoed, smiling sadly. You still think that word means something. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. The city glimmered below like a reflection of everything we'd built and destroyed. Then I pressed send. A soft ding echoed between us. The upload began, unstoppable. Daniel's phone buzzed seconds later. He looked down, face draining of color as notifications poured in. Journalists, investors, legal inquiries. His empire was unraveling, line by line, bite by bite. I turned to leave. Goodbye, Daniel, I said softly. This time, you can watch me disappear. And as I walked away, the screens of the city began to flicker. News alerts lighting up one after another. Breaking: Nova Edge under investigation for intellectual property fraud. Founder Daniel Vaughn accused of forgery and data theft. Whistleblower remains anonymous. The ghost had spoken, and the world was listening. That night, I drove north, past the bridge, past the fog, until San Francisco vanished in my rearview mirror. Lila called once, voice shaking. You did it. No, I said, eyes on the horizon. We did. I ended the call and let the silence fill the car. Somewhere deep inside, the ache began to fade, replaced by something quieter, steadier. Not vengeance, freedom. The world burns faster than people realize. One day you're on magazine covers, praised as a visionary. The next, your face is plastered across every headline under the word fraud. For Daniel Vaughn, it took less than 72 hours. By Monday morning, Nova Edge stock had plummeted 40%. By Wednesday, the board had frozen his assets. By Friday, the Department of Justice had officially launched an investigation into forgery, embezzlement, and intellectual property theft. His empire didn't crumble quietly. It collapsed, screaming. And through it all, I watched from a distance, not with joy, not even satisfaction, but something colder. Closure. Lila sat across from me in our new co-working space in Marin County, a simple office above a cafe, sunlight spilling through the window onto the table littered with laptops and coffee cups. So, she said, scrolling through her phone, the mighty Daniel Vaughn finally gets his spotlight back. Not the one he wanted, but hey, poetic justice, right? I didn't look up. Poetry is overrated. She studied me for a moment. You don't look happy. I'm not, I admitted, but I'm Done. Lila leaned back, crossing her arms. So that's it? You just walk away? That was always the plan. Truthfully, I thought I'd feel triumphant. That the moment his world burned, mine would light up again. But revenge doesn't glow, it smolders. For every article that praised Solace as the rising alternative to Nova Edge, I felt the same tug inside. The question of whether I'd really won anything at all. I'd taken his power, yes, but I'd also become everything he was, calculating, cold, obsessed. Maybe that was the real cost of vengeance. That afternoon, I went for a walk along the coast. The Pacific stretched endlessly, blue and unbothered. The waves had no memory of who had wronged them. They simply rose, fell, and began again. Somewhere out there, I realized, was the line between revenge and rebirth. I just hadn't crossed it yet. 2 days later, I received an unexpected email from Keston Capital subject. Private meeting request. Solace Technologies. We're impressed with Solace's transparency and innovation. We'd like to discuss potential funding to expand your platform. I stared at the message for a long time. Lila peeked over my shoulder. They want to invest? That's huge. I smiled faintly. Yes, but I don't want to build another empire. Then what do you want? She asked. I turned the screen off. Something real, something human. That evening, I drafted a public statement, anonymous but deliberate. It wasn't about Daniel. It wasn't about revenge. It was about what Solace stood for. Solace was never built to compete. It was built to remind us that technology should serve empathy, not ego. Every line of code carries a human heartbeat behind it, and every creation deserves its rightful voice. I hit publish. Within hours, it spread. Not viral, not sensational, but resonant. Quietly powerful. People shared it because it meant something. For the first time, my work spoke for itself. Not through headlines, not through vengeance, but through truth. 3 weeks later, I heard Daniel had been arrested at his penthouse. Wire fraud, forgery, false representation. The evidence trail was airtight. He'd left no one to blame but himself. When the photo surfaced, Daniel escorted out in handcuffs, jaw clenched, pride gone. I felt nothing. No victory, no rage, just silence. That's when I knew I was free. I spent the next few months rebuilding Solace, not as a corporation, but as a movement. Lila and I hired a small team of developers, mostly women, mostly people who'd been burned by the industry's power games. We built tools for transparency, open-source financial tracking, AI that explained its decisions instead of hiding them. Every line of code became an act of defiance, not against him anymore, but against everything he represented. And quietly, word spread. Startups reached out. Freelancers joined. Users wrote letters saying Solace helped them take back control of their businesses and their lives. One night, as I closed my laptop, Lila asked softly, "Do you ever think about him?" I paused. Sometimes. What would you say if you saw him again? I smiled faintly. Nothing, because he finally knows what silence feels like. Months later, Solace was featured at an ethics and AI conference. I didn't go on stage. Lila did. She stood beneath the lights, confident, radiant, speaking about innovation built on integrity. The applause was real. The future was hers. I stayed in the back of the hall, half in shadow, half in peace. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I just felt enough. After the conference, I walked outside into the evening air. The skyline glowed soft orange against the bay. The city that had once broken me now, glittering with possibility again. A soft breeze brushed my hair, carrying the smell of salt and rain. I thought of the girl I'd been, the one who'd trusted too easily, who'd been erased by the man she loved. She was gone, but in her place stood someone new, someone who'd learned that revenge doesn't rebuild. Forgiveness does, even if it's only for yourself. I took out my phone, opened a blank note, and typed 4 words. Kira Vaughn, no longer missing. Then I smiled, closed it, and slipped the phone away. The sea roared in the distance, steady and endless. And for the first time in years, I wasn't haunted anymore. I was home. A year passes differently when you've already lived 2 lives. One as the ghost of who you were, erased, forgotten, and another as the architect of your own rebirth. For me, that second life began quietly, not with fire or fury, but with peace. Solace was no longer a secret. By spring, the platform had become a movement. Universities used it to teach transparency and AI. Startups adopted its ethics model. Even former Nova Edge employees had joined, seeking redemption in the same system they'd once betrayed. Irony had a sense of humor, so did fate. And as for me, I stayed in the background where I belonged. Not hiding anymore, just choosing silence on my own terms. One morning, I stood by the bay, watching the fog roll in over the Golden Gate, the same skyline where my story had ended and begun again. I still wore the same necklace I'd worn the day Daniel betrayed me. A simple silver band with a chip engraved inside it. The first line of code I'd ever written. It used to remind me of loss. Now it reminded me of origin. Lila joined me, coffee in hand. She'd grown, more confident, more centered. She was everything I once hoped to be at her age. Fearless, curious, and free. They confirmed it, she said, her eyes bright. Solace got the grant from the Global Ethics Foundation. We'll be scaling to Europe next quarter. I smiled softly. You did it. She nudged my shoulder. We did it. Her phone buzzed, a news alert. She read it, then looked at me carefully. Daniel Vaughn was sentenced, she said. 8 years. Wire fraud, falsifying digital contracts, embezzlement. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The waves crashed quietly below the pier. Justice, Lila whispered. Closure, I corrected. Justice would have been never needing revenge at all. She studied my face. Do you regret it? I thought for a long time before answering. No, I said finally. But I regret who I had to become to get here. That night, I opened my old laptop. The same one that had carried every piece of code, every plan, every confession. I found a file I hadn't opened in years. Ecliptic V1.0. The original dream, before the lies, before the betrayal, before him. I hovered over the file name, then renamed it quietly. Ecliptic Final. Not to end it, but to seal it. To say goodbye to the woman who once thought she had to burn the world to reclaim her place in it. Later that week, I received a letter, handwritten surprisingly. No return address. Just one sentence inside. For what it's worth, I did love you once. The signature was a shaky D. I stared at the words for a long time, then folded the paper, slipped it into a drawer, and locked it away. Love isn't enough, I thought, not when it costs your soul. And maybe, in his own twisted way, Daniel had finally realized that too. Months rolled into summer. Solace expanded across borders, building communities, not corporations. We partnered with nonprofits, open-source developers, even student initiatives. No contracts, no manipulation, just shared vision and honest work. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoration, about proving that integrity could outlive ambition. One afternoon, I spoke at a small panel, not as a CEO, but as someone who once lost everything and found herself again through creation. There was no spotlight, no cameras, no applause, just quiet faces, listening. A young woman in the audience raised her hand. Ms. Vaughn, she said shyly, if someone took everything from you, your work, your name, your trust, how do you start again? I smiled gently. You don't start from where you fell, I said. You start from where you broke. That's where the real rebuilding begins. The room was silent, and for once, I didn't feel like a survivor. I felt like a teacher. That night, I returned to the coast, the same spot I'd stood a year before when I'd hit send and burned the past. The tide whispered against the rocks, the wind cool against my face. I pulled out my phone and opened a blank note. My private ritual. I typed, version 9.0, no vengeance left, only peace. Then I added one final line beneath it. The ghost has learned to live. I looked out over the dark water. For years, I had wanted Daniel to see what he'd lost. But now, I hoped he never did. Some punishments were quieter. Living with what you destroyed. Knowing the world moved on without you. That was his eternity. Mine was freedom. As I walked back toward my car, the first light of dawn broke over the water. The horizon glowed soft gold. New, forgiving, infinite. Somewhere between endings and beginnings, I finally understood. Revenge had been my fuel. But forgiveness, that was my freedom. I whispered, almost to the wind. Rest in peace, Kira Vaughn. Then I smiled. Long live Mara Langley. And just like that, the woman who'd once been erased finally wrote her own ending. Not in fire, but in light.